Hello to everyone logged in for this evening's webinar. We're going to get started in 5 minutes at the top of the hour. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's webinar, Tips for Effective Mind or Time Management. I'm looking forward to spending this next hour or so with all of you. I'm glad you could join in. Before we get started, I always love to thank Justin Gray and the entire team at 99 The Agency for allowing me the opportunity to be with all of you, the amazing talent, all of the members of 99. I'm glad you're here, and I always look forward to being in rooms with all of you, giving you great information, hopefully something you could take and use in your lives, in your businesses, in your careers, and thrive, move forward, and just accelerate whatever you're looking to accelerate. Tonight, we are going to be focusing on time management. So that's going to be the key for this evening. For those of you that are with me in multiple rooms. You've been in rooms with me before. Thank you all so much for coming back. I'm glad to have you. I'm glad to have you continue to follow me, join in on my webinars. The majority of you that do follow me, you also come up with very good questions, so I'm grateful for that. Thank you to all those that are coming back into one of my rooms. For those of you that are brand new to me, hello and welcome. My name is Rob Hinds, and the name of my company is Raise Your Lid Consulting. And I teach and inspire people to elevate their thinking, their communication, their leadership skills. I do all of this through three things. I do it through personal and professional coaching services. I do it for training programs, which this evening and all the programs that I do for 99, I call my micro learning series or micro learning modules, where within an hour or so, I could share with you really simple and applicable things. However, one of the things I do for groups, organizations, companies of all sizes, I do more detailed training programs and workshops. And then the third thing I do are educational speaking engagements, whether it's keynote, panel discussions, Q&A, that sort of thing. Since we're all part of the entertainment world, we all have our specialty. Whether you're into acting, producing, you're behind the scenes, you're a photographer, a model, you're a musician, whatever you're doing in the entertainment industry, all of the information that I share with people in my programs are not only relevant and relative, but they're really simple and applicable. Just to make small changes in your life and in your career, it's all about small steps. Okay, so here's how things normally work in my rooms. If you have a question, please put it into the Q&A or chat. And at the end of the program, I always leave enough time for me to go through and answer and respond to everybody's question. Now, please make sure that your questions are very clear. It's not necessary to give me a long story or a lot of background on your question. Just please ask it straight out. And if it's relevant to one particular piece of the presentation, let me know that as well so I'll know exactly what you're asking. If you do have thoughts or a comment or feedback or anything like that, you can absolutely put it in the chat and I will read through everything. The only things I'm going to read on air are the questions for me so everybody could benefit from my responses. So we'll keep it at that, and please at any time put your questions into the Q&A or the chat. All right. Since we're talking about time this evening, there's a lot of ways we think about time, what we say about time, how we talk about it, how we operate within it. And normally, there are a few things that come up more than others. Not saying that there isn't other thinking about time, but these are normally the things we either say about time or we at least hear other people say about time. Some people have the idea that there's not enough time. There's not enough time in the day. There's not enough time to accomplish what I want to accomplish. There's not enough time to get this done by the deadline. There's not enough time for me to rehearse my lines, to rehearse my music, anything like that. Then there are the people that say or think that they don't have any time. All of us have a quote unquote busy life to a certain extent. However, when we start to trap ourselves into the I don't have any time, here's what I would encourage you to do, just right out of the gate, even before we get into the information. If you're one of those people who say you don't have any time, I would seriously encourage you to take a look at all the things that you misinvest your time in. Instead of scrolling on TikTok for an hour and 15 minutes, could you have made it 30 minutes and gain that time back? So people a lot of times say, I don't have any time. Some people just look at it as, I wish there was more of it. I wish we had more time. I wish we had more time on this earth. I wish I had more time with my family. I wish I had more time on set. Anything like that. A lot of times people are in a wishful mode around the way they think and the way they talk about time. And then there's the people who put things off, either procrastinating or people who have a hard time making decisions. And they're of the mindset, well, there's always tomorrow. I can always do it later. And I'm sure all of you have heard an analogy similar to this, but we can be hit by a bus at any time. We could be taken out of our lives at any moment. So, that whole there's always tomorrow, that may be viable for some things. However, once we get into that talk about time and that mindset about time that there's always tomorrow, we can always do it later, sometimes you can't. And then there's the people that maybe there are some of you in the room, if there are any of you in the room that are perfectionists or really analytical about the way you do things, about the way you make decisions about your time. I call myself a recovering perfectionist. I'm doing my best to not be a perfectionist about certain things. And when I bring it in relativity to time, a lot of people say, well, when the time's right, I'll do it. When the time's right, I'll get into modeling. When the time's right, I'll write a new song. So a lot of the time when we speak about time, when it's right, chances are that also leads us into procrastination, which we talked about. And then there's what I call the misconceptions of busy. Now, busy in our society, a lot of times it's looked at as a badge of honor. Oh, I'm so busy. My calendar's packed, busy, 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 all this. Well, busy doesn't mean you're productive. And busy is actually a very, very unhealthy thing. So the more we refer, especially our time, to being busy, busy's not a healthy thing. It's not a good thing. It's chaotic. You would rather think of it or have the mindset around time as being, am I productive? Am I profitable? Am I am I fulfilled? Am I inspired with the way I spend my time? So those misconceptions of busy really throw us off. All right. I've said this in so many classes for so long. I just I had to put my own quote into this presentation. How we think about time is ultimately how we use it, lose it, or waste it. Here's the deal, people. We're all provided with the same amount of time. It's really what we do with it that differs. In other words, it's how we invest it or misinvest our time. And that's the real question that I'd like you to think about when it comes to your time. Those things we talked about earlier. Oh, I don't have time. I wish there was more. I'll get to it tomorrow. I encourage you to think about time in this way. How am I investing my time? Or how am I misinvesting my time? What are the things that don't deserve my time? Now, this is also a good moment to bring up that the way we think about time and talk about time doesn't need to be black and white. It doesn't need to be, do I invest or not invest my time in this? It could be, how much time do I invest in this? And is it beneficial? If it's something that's beneficial, you may want to invest more time in those things. For the things that are not beneficial, you may want to reduce the amount of time you invest in those things. But this is the real question to think about here. And after you get through with this, if there's any one little nugget you pull away from this, I would encourage this. How do I invest my time or how do I misinvest it? All right. When we get to thinking about time, we just talked about how we talk about time. Now, there's a couple sides of how we think about time. Again, this isn't black and white. You may have things on both sides of this that you do think about. However, when we do look at it from a thought process way, there are people that think time is limited. These are these are for either for our doers, our really high performers that say, "Man, I don't have enough time. Time's limited. There's so much I want to do." The limited time thought is also for what I call our doomers. Well, I just don't have time. I'm not good with time. I'm terrible with time. Then on that side of things, there's people that think that time is infinite. And these are for our dreamers, our big picture people, or they're for our procrastinators, the people that put things off. For dreamers, they think time is infinite because they'll just throw out all the ideas in hopes that all of them could come true, in hopes that they could do all these things they're thinking about. They think time is infinite in that way. And then for the procrastinators, they think there's plenty of time to do this. I could always put it off till next week, put that idea on the shelf, and come back to it later. When we start to think about time in these ways, it also becomes very stressful and it adds pressure. Again, all of us are provided the same amount of time in a day. Now, we're not all provided the same amount of time in our lives. That's up to multiple factors. However, when it comes to the daily operations, there's 24 hours in a day. So, what are you doing with all those hours, those minutes, those seconds? What are you doing with it? And a lot of times we put pressure on ourselves if we start to think about time as either limited or infinite. If we're more in a fixed mindset or either a pessimistic mindset, it's all the things that can't be done. Oh, I can't take time out of my day to do this because I'm so busy. Well, if you're not taking care of yourself, time will actually shorten on you. It will take care of that shortening of your time. Some people think about what we can squeeze in, and this is again for the people that are the high performers or the doers. You know, they want to cram every possible thing into every possible moment, and that can be detrimental either to your health, to your mindset. Um, it even eliminates quality. If you're really not taking appropriate amounts of time and you're just jamming things in, you'll notice that things get forgotten, mistakes get made. So those are a lot of the things that happen when we try to squeeze as much into our time as possible. And then there's overwhelm. And when we get overwhelmed about things, production goes down. Again, mistakes are made. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of what I'll call unproductive activity or inactivity. Things just don't happen. And if you have overwhelm for long enough, it does turn into burnout. So that's one side of how some people think about time. On the other side of things, people think of it as a precious and a valuable gift. We're given this opportunity. What can I do to make the most of it? When we're in this type of mindset, which is more of a growth mindset, now we think of things like, okay, how do I adapt? How do I adapt my time? How do I adapt my time to be the most productive? The things that really aren't beneficial for my time, how do I weigh those out and either diminish them or shelf them, that sort of thing. In this growth mindset part about time, we think about the things that are within our control. People who are on the other side of the way they think about time are always worried about the things that are out of their control. They're worried about, you know, our bomb's going to go off and we're going to be taken off this earth, and all the things that are out of our control, they really focus on. But the people with a growth mindset around time think about the things that are within our control. What can we do to make the most of our time? We think about things like what's possible. What are some of the things that we can do or do better with our time? What's important? And this really comes into play when you start to prioritize things. And when you think about what's important to you versus what you think is important to others, there can be a major shift in your thinking about time. Then we get into the what's truly urgent piece. Now, there are many people that I call are always in emergency mode. Everything's urgent, everything's important, everything needs to be done now. Nonsense. When you actually take some time and you prioritize appropriately what's going on in your life and the way you're spending your time, you'll really know what's truly urgent. And then you think about what's undeserving of my time. Who are the people that don't deserve as much of my time or haven't earned as much of my time? What are the projects that are wasting my time? What are the things I'm doing in my daily routine, in my business, in my personal life, in my relationships, either professional or personal? What am I doing and what or who is undeserving of that time? And then just taking a look at how it's used unnecessarily. And this is where everybody, you could start to trim the fat, so to speak, about this. This is where you could really put a solid perspective on your time. All right. Now we're going to get into all the tips that I'm going to share with you this evening about having efficient mind or time management. Now, you notice that I put mind and time management in there. The reason I refer to it as mind management is because the time is the same for all of us. The way it operates within our heads is very different. So it's more of a mind management thing than it actually is time. Time just happens to be the mechanism. All right. These are the things we're going to talk about this evening. So let's start first with plan ahead and be prepared. I know, I've noticed, especially in the entertainment industry, um, being prepared, people either take this really seriously or they take it very flippantly and not seriously. There's not a lot of middle ground in the entertainment industry. Now, some of you may be very well balanced. However, overall, there are certain industries that are really, really known across the globe to be prepared, and there are industries that are not. So when you look at plan ahead and be prepared, are you spending the time to prepare for things, whether it's an audition, whether it's practicing your music, cultivating your personal brand for modeling, whatever that is, what is your preparation for those things? Or are you just throwing things against the wall and hoping and praying that they work? When you spend time preparing, preparation is not only one of the keys to more consistent success, it's also a great reliever of pressure. It takes the stress off of you. Now, for those of you in the room that are very, very last minute people, you live your life, nothing wrong with that. However, when there's lack of planning or lack of preparation for certain things, it causes a lot more stress. And the people who are out there winging it all the time, they're the ones, normally, they're the people that end up with more frustration, more wondering why things aren't working out for them, why things aren't working out consistently for them. The other thing that preparation does, it saves the time of going back and forth. So, for example, if you really prepared for something, let's say I prepared for this program this evening, and I did. So, in preparing for that, I wanted to make sure that if there were any glitches, whether it was in my presentation, the things I was going to talk about, by knowing that ahead of time, it would have saved me a little bit of uncomfortableness with all of you, a little bit of back and forth with myself, saying, "Oh, you know what? I messed this up. I could have fixed this ahead of time." So it saves time by eliminating back and forth for the things that could have been handled before you actually did them. Realistically, your forethought, your planning, your preparation will bode well for you. So that's the first tip of the evening for great mind or time management. Now we move to knowing your goals and initiatives. And I know that goals get talked about all the time, make goals, smart goals, however you decide to look at goals. When we think about goals, especially when it comes to our time, I encourage people to engage in activities that support your goals, while at the same time addressing the real needs of others, whether it's your consumer or customer, whether it's somebody you're trying to work with or work for. Engaging in activities that support what you're doing and support your goals, that's where the majority of your time would need to go. Having a plan around the activities, and let's say your goal is to make more money. So you want to make sure that your activities match what your goals are. So you would want to make sure if money was your goal, making more money, you would want to make sure that the activities that you're doing lean toward that and contribute to that. If one of your goals was to get a part in a large production, whether it's TV, film, whatever that looks like, then what you would do is you would research those projects and the activities you would be doing would be contributing to large projects if that was your goal. So making sure that our actions are moving toward what our goals are is a very important tip. This is something that I use for my coaching clients. I teach in my training programs. This is a really simple way to break down your time or mind management. And it's called the Eisenhower Decision Matrix. And as you can see across the top of this, there's the things that are urgent or not urgent. And then on the left side, you could see there are the things that are important or not important. Now, the beauty and the simplicity of the Eisenhower Matrix is once you decide what's truly urgent, not urgent, what's truly important, what's not important, now you get to put them into these categories and it actually helps you prioritize your time very well. So I'll break this down within a couple minutes. First of all, things that are both urgent and important, those are the things you do. You do it now, or you do it as soon as possible. Anything that's both urgent needs to get done quickly and important needs to get done, you do right away. Very plain and simple. Now, for those of you in the room that maybe that everything's an emergency type of mentality, this one's going to be very hard for you because now you have to dig a little bit deeper and think a little bit deeper about what's truly urgent and what's truly important. Then we move from things that are not urgent. However, they're important. Things that are not urgent, meaning they don't need to get done right now. They're important, so they need to get done. This is where you decide or you schedule it. So something that's not urgent and needs to get done, you schedule it. You decide a deadline, you decide a time and a place that it's going to get done. Then we move back over to urgent and not important. So it's something that needs to get done now. However, it's really not important or catastrophic or massively impactful. These are the things you could either delegate, you could delegate to someone else if you have that ability or if you have people that can do it. For example, there's three of us in my household. All three of us can throw out the garbage. If the garbage stinks and it urgently needs to go out, it's not important that one of us over the other does it. We can delegate that. Or if something is urgent, needs to get done right away, however, not that important, you could also automate it. I'll give a personal example of that. When people schedule time with me, I have an automated scheduler. They could go online 24/7. They could see when I'm available. They could schedule time with me either virtually or in person. They could put notes in there. So, really, my schedule, I have very little directly to do with it. However, it's urgent to me, so I can delegate that out or automate that to a system. Then finally, we have what's not urgent, doesn't need to be done right away, and not important, may not even need to be done. This is where you could delete it, eliminate it. For those of you that are information hoarders and you really have problems getting rid of things off your list, you could do what I call shelf it. Just put it somewhere, file the idea away, file it away, whatever it is, and forget about it for the moment. And if you decide to, bring it up again someday, you can. But really, if something's not urgent and not important, chances are you could eliminate it or get rid of it. The Eisenhower decision matrix. Then there's something called the Pareto principle. And basically, there's the things that are important, not important, much like the Eisenhower matrix that we went through. However, it's looked at a little bit differently. This is where you invest time toward activities that actually produce the results you're looking for. So if something's important to you and those results are important to you, you would spend the majority amount of your time on those things. For the things that are not important, you wouldn't put as much time or as much effort into it. So that's basically the Pareto principle. It's also called the 80-20 rule for any of you that have heard of that before. The next tip I'm going to share with you is create a schedule. Now, some of you may be very, very good at scheduling. I don't know, you use the Google Calendar on your phone, or you have an appointment book, if you're an actual writer or anything like that. Whatever you're doing to create a schedule, that's a good first step. Now, if you're somebody that doesn't create a schedule and you're winging it all the time, this is where time gets misinvested really easily. If you are one of those people who can or do create a schedule, here's the next step I would encourage you to do. Also attach deadlines around your schedule. So let's say you're going to write a new song. You have this idea for a song, you're going to write it. So you decide, okay, you know what? On Thursday, you might even note the time. On Thursday from 10 to noon, I'm going to work on this song. That's great to schedule it. So creating a schedule solid. Now to even add to that, you'll say, you know what? I also want to be done with the first draft of this song by the next Thursday. So now you're actually giving yourself a deadline which holds you more accountable for the things that are on your schedule. And sometimes we put things on our schedule. If we go back to the Eisenhower matrix of decision making and prioritizing, if you have things on your schedule that are just taking up your time without the results you're looking for, some of these things that you want to put into your schedule, you might think that you can't. However, once you start to prioritize and clarify better, you'll be able to find time to schedule things and then also establish deadlines around it. Ooh, this next one is very, very tough for some people, especially if you're an empath, if you have people-pleasing tendencies in you, if it's hard for you to say no, if you're really heartfelt, if you constantly give and give and give yourself and give your time to others, establishing boundaries is really hard. At the end of the day, no matter what your mindset is, you are the boss of your own mind. Now, if other people are taking advantage of that in you, that's that's something that you would need to work on. And that's why establishing boundaries is a very tough thing to do. However, it's one of the most important things to do. You have every ability to politely and kindly decline a request. If there are other things you have prioritized you need to do, you can simply say no in a very appropriate way. Now, this is also a thing for either people or things that are taking your time or wasting your time and not benefiting you at all. You have the ability to establish that boundary. And it could be, I know I brought up, scrolling on TikTok or Instagram, those types of things, or watching reel after reel after reel about something that's out of your control. You have the ability to establish that boundary within yourself and reel those things in. So boundaries aren't only what you do with others, boundaries are also with what you do with yourself. As long as you're learning from different experiences, you could really avoid wasting time down the road. This is another tough one for many people. And realistically, all of our attention spans across the world have really, really, really reduced because things are so simple to come to us. The media comes right to our phones. There's constant things all around us, feeding us information nonstop. So being distractible is a very challenging thing for everybody. It's how we grasp it and how we take control of it that makes a difference. So here the goal or the tip is to minimize distractions and interruptions. If you'll notice, if you look at it from an energy standpoint, and this is a great simple graphic that I found. When your energy is everywhere, things don't get done well, quality lacks, mistakes are made, plus your sanity goes out the window. When your energy is focused and you're moving in a focused direction, you have good priorities, you have a great schedule, things really start to hum along and you keep a lot more of your sanity. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't do a couple things simultaneously, occasionally, or work on a couple different projects on different days. It doesn't mean that you have to solidly move in one direction, but the more you can focus your energy, the better things come out, the less stress you have, and there's a lot more quality to your lives. Here's some tips to minimize distractions or interruptions. And I actually fairly recently put this into the presentation because of all the research that I do. And then with all my clients, I started to get to ask those questions. They're like, okay, Rob, well, it's easy to say don't be distracted, but what are some of the things I can do to make myself less distractible? So here's a couple of notes for you. The first thing I would say is look at what I call your self-induced distractions. That means nobody else is involved. This is me. What are the things that are distracting you most? And then you can adjust accordingly. So if social media is your biggest distraction, if binging Netflix is your biggest distraction, if eating is your biggest distraction, whatever that is, I ask you to look at your self-induced distractions first because those are the things 100% in your control that have nothing to do with anybody else. After you take a look at your self-induced distractions, now you can look at your outside induced interruptions. How frequently are you interrupted? What are you interrupted by? Who is interrupting you? Now, once you find out all these sources of interruption, now you could decide, okay, how do I minimize those things? How do I sidestep some of those things? Now, some of the questions I get around outside induced interruptions, you know, maybe you live in a household with a lot of people and you're constantly interrupted. It's hard. Do you go to the library to get some peace and quiet? Do you go to a coffee shop to get some peace and quiet? Do you put on your headphones? What are some of the things you could do in each of those situations to become less distractible? Sometimes it's changing our environment, and instead of being in that household or that area that's just creating a lot of distraction, moving to a different area. Um, Sometimes it's self-discipline. You know, for me, a lot of times, just by leaving my phone in the other room helps. So it could be small little things that you could do to be less distractible. Setting boundaries for sure with yourself and with other people. That's something to where you can adjust. But I will share with you this truth. What you permit or what you allow, you promote. So if people are constantly interrupting you and you let them, you're letting them. There needs to be a time to where you don't allow that anymore, or you have maybe a difficult or a challenging conversation with somebody around that. So you're not distracted as much. But what you permit, you promote. Allowing distractions is your choice. Now, the things out of our control, thunder and lightning that might bother you, anything like that, car accident that's held you up in traffic, that's distracted you or interrupted your day. The things out of our control, they are what they are. However, for the most part, allowing distractions, that's your choice. Procrastination, that's a big one for a lot of people. Now, sometimes people procrastinate out of fear. Sometimes people procrastinate because they believe there'll always be time to do it. So there are multiple different reasons for procrastinating and putting things off. The solution or the kryptonite to procrastination is discipline. If you need to get something done, push yourself to get it done. If it's something that's valuable, you'll be happy that you did it. If it's something you've been pushing off, maybe because of fear, maybe you have to have a tough conversation with somebody, maybe there's a breakup, something like that. By putting that off, it creates a lot more anxiety in you, a lot more anxious feelings in you. When you can become disciplined around procrastination, you could absolutely knock it out. Then there's evaluate and adjust. So here's where you continually look at the way you talk about time, the way you view time. By all means, the things that I'm sharing with you this evening, it's not that you leave this presentation and you have to work on everything. Not at all. Take small steps. So, in evaluate and adjust, this is a really good time to look at the things you've been doing, reviewing your goals, your initiatives, and seeing where you're investing or misinvesting your time. Then also, when you review your goals and initiatives and you get to evaluate on a regular basis, you say, is this working for me or is this not working for me? And this is where you could start to adjust. You invest the appropriate amount of time in the areas that need your attention or are really valuable to you. You start to monitor your time invested better. And now you're looking at the results. You're making an evaluation on what you're doing. You also learn lessons. there are a lot of times to where, and there are still a couple small things in my life where I do get sucked in and I misinvest that time. Sometimes it takes multiple repetitions or big mistakes for you to get it. It's all okay. That's why evaluate and adjust is a great tip for all of you this evening because you start to learn from time mismanagement and you're able to adjust. And then for the things that are working for you, continue to do them, continue to build on them. Now, when you evaluate and then you adjust, then you evaluate again. So this becomes a regular occurring thing. I call it rinse and repeat. You do it again. You've evaluated everything, you made some adjustments, let it ride. You see how it goes. Once you've done that, then you reevaluate. You go, okay, based on my last adjustment, whatever, 3 months ago, what am I going to do in these next 3 months? What do I need to adjust now? So whether you do it quarterly, annually, every month, whatever you decide to do, constantly evaluating and adjusting, a really, really good tip to make the most out of your time. Then, quite simply, there's purge. Quite honestly, people, there's shit we don't need to do and we don't need to take part in, and things that take our time that absolutely don't need to. For the very, very clear time wasters, eliminate it. Now, sometimes easier said than done, and I do fully understand this. Sometimes there are people in your life that you can't really purge, but can you minimize? Can you at least do something to misinvest less time in them? However, there are things in all of our lives to where if we didn't do it anymore, it wouldn't only not hurt us, it may actually make us feel better or be better. So purging things that waste your time, eliminate the tasks or the people that don't produce results or let you live a fulfilled life. All right. These are a couple of really good books, really good resources, simple reads, that sort of thing. The first one is Mind Management, Not Time Management. In this book, it lays out a lot of the things that I talked about in this presentation tonight, just with, of course, a lot more detail. We only have a certain amount of time together, so Mind Management, Not Time Management is very good. And then there's The Myth of Multitasking. I'll put it to all of you this way. If there's any of you in the room that believe you're a good multitasker, research has shown that those people that think that are actually the worst multitaskers. They either make the most mistakes, they're the most forgetful. Now, that may apply or may not apply to any of you in the room. However, research is research, and our brain is much like a computer in this way. A computer does one thing at a time, however, very quickly. Our brain does the same thing. Our brain is only designed to do one thing at a time. However, when we are doing multiple things at a time, first of all, we're distractible. And secondly, it takes time for our brain to get back enough focus to accomplish the thing we set out to do before we started doing multiple other things. And from a computer standpoint, how many times have you had a lot of windows open on your computer, or maybe it didn't move as fast as you did, and you keep hitting the enter button, and now it's taking more time, taking more time, taking more time, or you're trying to save a document and it says not responding. Our brain does the same thing when we multitask. So, some really good resources here for you. All right. Now I'm going to check the chat for any questions. So if you have any last moment questions, please put them in the Q&A or chat right now. While I check the chat, here's something I put together for all of you this evening. This is my gift to you for being in the room this evening. I'm grateful for all of you. If you scan this QR code, I actually took an outline or a breakdown of everything we talked about tonight, and I put it in a very simple, savable document for you so you could save it on your phone, put it as your screensaver, file it somewhere, or just not use it at all. So while I leave this up on the screen, let me take a look at the Q&A in the chat and see what questions we have. Okay, some great commentary. Thank you, thank you, thank you for the comments. Okay, it looks like we have our first question of the evening, and this is from Kai. Kai, as always, thank you for coming in the rooms with me. You always ask some questions, and I appreciate that. So tonight, Kai asks, what if planned to make time for something, requested the time off, get the time off, but suddenly, right before the requested day, your job suddenly can't give you that time? How would you go about that? Well, that's really not a time management question. That's more of having a challenging conversation with the people at your work. So, my answer to you of how would you go about that? I would bring up the facts, the fact that, hey, I requested this time off, you gave it to me. I have something serious planned. I'm not going to be able to fulfill that time you're asking me back for and change my plans. Or you might come up with a compromise to where, you do work that shift or whatever that they asked you and you could compromise, but it's more about having a challenging conversation appropriately than it is about time management. I hope that helps, Kai. Thank you for the question. Okay. Next question is from Julie. Julie, thank you so much for coming back to the room. I always appreciate you having you here. Julie asks, if an actress, model, and musician realizes they have been spending more time doing whatever others want them to do with their time, how does the talent stand their ground and turn things around? Julie, this goes directly back to establishing and enforcing boundaries. This is all on you. It's up to you to establish those boundaries. Let people know what you're willing and not willing to do. Let them know your expectations. Let them know the timelines. And you have to stand by and enforce those things. If you try to enforce boundaries, but you don't enforce them, you're at the mercy of the other people and they're going to continue to roll on you. So my encouragement and the answer to your question is figure out what you're willing and not willing to do and communicate that very clearly with those people. And at the end of the day, once you enforce boundaries, people will either abide by them, they may continue to push through them. But the more you enforce them and the more consistent you are enforcing your boundaries, the more people are going to realize that and the better off you're going to be. Great question, Julie. Thank you for that. Also, I have a program on establishing boundaries that I do for 99 The Agency. You may want to look into that program and attend that one. Okay. Looking through. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for the commentary. Some great stuff. Okay. Tracy, welcome back. Glad to have you back in the room with me this evening. Tracy asks, what should one do when it seems as if everything external is controlling my time and I have no control over what I'm having to do? The first thing I'll tell you, Tracy, is that's an absolute myth. And that's where I would strongly encourage you to establish more of a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. Your fixed mindset is telling you other things are controlling your time and you have no control over what you're having to do, absolutely not true. We all have choices. You can choose to do or not do whatever you want. Now, for some people, they say, well, if I don't do what they say, I'll lose my job and that sort of thing. You always have the choice to look for another job. You always have the choice to have that conversation with your supervisor, your manager, your boss, whomever that is. But when it seems if everything is controlling your time, it's more of a mindset thing, Tracy. So your mindset and also boundaries, just like I talked about with Julie's question, your mindset and your boundaries are very, very important here. If you could transition your mindset to say that you have control over your time and what happens with it, you'll be better served. Thank you for that. Okay. Again, some very good commentary. Okay, it looks like we have another question here. This question is from Anthony. Anthony, thank you for joining us this evening and thank you for your question. Anthony asks, when you are overbooked, how do you go about selecting what is priority? Ooh, this is a really good one. Anthony, for this, I would encourage you to look at what are the expected results of each of those things, and you could probably find the thing that's going to be the most beneficial to you or to the group or to the project. Whatever is most beneficial, that would be something when you're overbooked that you would prioritize. So look at what those potential results could be and how beneficial they are to you, and that's where you would set your priority. That's a phenomenal question. Thank you for that. I hope that helps. Okay. Okay, Julie. She says a two-part question. Part number one, how can someone change their mind frame when they realize they have spent time doing things that they did not bring about, that did not bring about the desired result? So changing your mind frame in that, first of all, Julie, is looking at the result for what it was. You know what? That result did nothing for me. I'm not going to do that any again. So really, the first part of your question is learning the lesson and taking action on that lesson. If you do allow the same things that are unproductive over and over and over again, that goes back to your mindset. So if you're able to change your mind frame and look at that result and say, that doesn't work for me, I'm no longer doing that, that's the answer to the first part of your question. Part two, what is your advice to help a person recover if an extremely close loved one spends time every day in prayer and then all of a sudden that prayer partner says they don't have time to spend time with you every day because they have work to do? Well, this is where empathy and compassion and understanding come into play. It doesn't appear that this person said they didn't care about you. They're just needing to evaluate their time differently. Being an empathic person, especially if you're a person that uses prayer, you would have a good understanding of those things and not take them personally. Now, if somebody says, I don't want to spend time with you because I don't like you or something a little more overt, then you might have different feelings about it. However, the way you put it in your question, they don't have time to spend with you because they have work to do. They're learning that, okay, it's not that you're not important, it's just that there may be other things that are priority in that moment. So I would encourage you to look at it more open-mindedly and with a little bit of empathy and understanding. I hope that helps. Great question. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else. While I do a last check on this, here's all of my information. If any of you decide to find me on social channels, anything like that. If you scan this QR code, it takes you to my bio site to where you could go to my website. You could download my information, anything like that. All right, let me take one last look for questions. All right, it looks like that's it for everybody this evening. I'm so happy to be with all of you. Thank you so much for being with me. I have plenty of 9/9 events coming up, so please look on the calendar. If something I'm doing suits you, I would love to have you back in the room. Have a wonderful evening, everybody, and a great rest of the week. We'll talk soon.